Hello everyone. I wanted to do a recording now that I've put a good amount of hours into Borderlands 3. It would seem a few of my theories were off when I made those recordings prior to Borderlands 3. I think a good portion of that is more or less in the developers than my ability to read it. The reason I'm saying that is because these trees, the way they're built, now that I've played, is just questionable. Like, I don't even understand what they were thinking when they made this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do two recordings because I'm struggling to get recordings out at night where it's quiet. So we'll talk about the problems and then we'll go into the skill trees a bit later in the second recording. Alright, starting with Moze. So Cloud of Lead, the issue with this one is it's really only there to conserve ammo. That bonus incendiary damage does nothing. I'm level 26 on Moze, and I'm only seeing maybe 6 incendiary damage from this ability, which is a total crapshoot. I think part of the problem is that not only they base this on a low percentage, and on the fact that Moze was more or less designed to try and work with automatic weaponry, Dahl or Vladoff. Those are going to be naturally low on damage. If this was something like Jacob's weaponry, okay, then that wouldn't be as much of an issue. But Moze does not get a reload speed, so she can't really work with Jacob's weaponry as well as someone as like Zane. So yeah, this is a total crapshoot on the second part. This would be better if it was physical damage. That way it's more versatile. Stoke the Embers is under the same problem as really a lot of the skills. There are some enemies that are completely immune to incendiary. And even then, Moze only gets a weapon swap speed if she's moving. You're not going to be moving all the time, so getting an incendiary weapon just to go after fleshy targets is not really beneficial to Moze. You're better going full physical damage with Moze. So this right here only really does something with Salamander, if you happen to use it. But that has its own issues. Because the minigun is physical damage, it's versatile. If you let off some steam, if you put in let off some steam and then Specialist Bear with it, this thing can melt bosses. So at least with that, it's more versatile and don't have to worry about switching it. Now, if you do encounter a boss that you know is going to be there that's not going to have shields or armor, then yes, you can switch to Salamander. And then that would complement it. But that's a big if. You're better off just equipping the minigun because it's physical. Moving on to Redistribution. So, Redistribution is based on critical hits. As I've discovered, even with a Dahl burst weapon, it's kind of hard to hit the head. Even if you do manage to get lucky enough to hit the head, the issue is that percent of magazine. You're going to be dumping so many rounds that this regen will not be able to keep up. This really only works if you're trying to use like a Dahl sniper rifle, for example. Because at least with that, you know, you're doing high damage per bullet and you're guaranteeing that you're getting that critical hit. But Moze was supposed to work with automatic weaponry, so it doesn't make sense to put a sniper skill in here, in the slightest. Scorching RPMs is under the same thing. It's why are you putting critical hit damage under there when Moze is not even a sniper? So yeah, that was poor design on the devs' part, I think. This really should have been fleshed out a lot better. Iron Bank, because it's based on percentage, really does not help that much either. This really only works with flat-off weaponry. With Dahl weaponry, you're lucky to even get 8 more bullets out of this when you've maxed it out. To get 8 more bullets for 5 skill points, which are extremely precious, that's just not worth it. This should have been a flat increase, not a percent. Oh, and my theory about match set being completely useless, I was so right. Because it's magazine size percent, not worth it. If it was flat magazine size, then maybe it would have worked out, but then you would have needed like a vendor specific to a manufacturer. Because you only get Marcus munitions, you don't really have a good chance to get the manufacturer you want out of it. So I think that they probably could have done this a lot better by actually having vendors specific to each manufacturer. But moving on. So under here, same thing. Bonus incendiary damage on critical hit. Like, really? She's not a sniper. Yeah, and this one, critical kill? Like, really? I hope you realize that there's bosses that don't even have a critical hit spot. So, yeah, you're not really benefiting much out of that. Over here, you have similar issues. This requires you to be dealing splash damage, which only works in groups. If you're shooting at a boss, well, then it's not really going to matter because the boss is more than likely not going to have minions next to it. Again, splash damage, and again, it's based on weapon magazines, so that's completely useless. Oh, and auto bear. So I did avoid going to this skill because I really wasn't sure what the deal with it was, and I'm really glad I didn't go anywhere near it during my theory recordings, because there are some instances where you just want to bail out and conserve fuel. This completely negates your ability to do that, because it turns the bear into basically a AI controlled turret. Oh, and if it's one thing I've learned with the games, AI is derpy. Don't expect this to target the correct target. But yeah, outside of that, I mean, I don't see really much of an issue with this tree. If this tree was actually a little bit better designed than some of the others. So yeah, that's Moze. Let's go and look at Zane. So I was right with my theory that the whole digiclone thing would not be good for Zane. That's because even if you have which one's real, it only lasts for 4 seconds. So the second that wears off, the enemies are more than likely going to be targeting you, and that just doesn't help considering Zane doesn't have any escapes like Moze. Because like with Moze, if you're in an SOL situation, you just Iron Bear out, right? You get your shields back and everything. But Zane doesn't have that luxury. He is entirely reliant on his skills to do the work for him. Because of that, the barrier is actually a far better ability than Digiclone. And I called that very early on. So, yeah. And then there's just some things in this tree that weren't really thought of, like Quick Breather. You may think, wow, that's great. Zane actually can start recharging shields. Well, there's an issue with this. Notice that there's no bonuses beyond the shield recharge. If you come back to Moze, you'll notice that her ability to recharge shields actually gets a shield recharge rate bonus. Zane doesn't get that. So that means that this ability is entirely reliant on Ready for Action in order to see any kind of gain from it. And then you just look at the rest of this tree and you're like, really, kind of thing? Because, like, yeah, Digiclone could do damage, but the question is, how long are you going to last? You know, and that's probably not going to be very long because you're going to be the one taking the damage more so than your Digiclone. You know, it's not like Barrier where it doesn't really matter because it blocks more things than I realized. At first, I thought Barrier would only block, like, bullets, but it can actually block the ice and fire cannon things from that Malawan heavy thing. So this actually negates so much damage in comparison to Digiclone. So yeah, there's plenty of issues here, and yeah, like I pointed out, I didn't think that this would be a very good tree. This tree is actually one of the better ones for Zane because, as I pointed out, he's got a lot of kill skills, and there's some things in here that are really nice. Actually, this tree works extremely well with Jacob's weaponry because of the higher reload speed and the additional movement speed. Because of all that, you actually can do a lot of damage, and you can get up close enough to where Jacob's weaponry can work. Because hitting anything at range with Jacob's weaponry is a nightmare in itself because most of them are iron sights. I've noticed it's pretty rare that you get the scope. So hitting iron sights on Jacob's is just so difficult because of just how much recoil it has. So yeah, you're actually better off you making the most out of this tree and this tree. Now let me go and talk about the one last problem with Zane's tree. So as I've learned, elemental damage in this game is a bit different. If you look at a weapon, it will say like 150% cryo efficiency, right? So that, as far as I can tell, directly relates to your chance of completely freezing a target. So I thought Calm, Cool, and Collected would be actually a good skill, but it's entirely reliant on you having an actually good cryo weapon. Because if it's 150% efficiency, it might take a while to actually get there. Yeah, so that's that problem. But yeah, because this is the best skill tree for Zane, this has its own issues. Not just in the cryo abilities, but also in the fact that it relies on your shields being up. The problem is your barrier is not going to be up 24/7, so you can't effectively rely on your shields being up. So this actually would have been, if the devs were actually thinking about the skill tree, I think that they could have made this so it's based on your percent total shields, right? So let's just say you have 869 shields. Well, let's just say, you know, you get maybe like 10% cooldown from that, right? That would be far more efficient than the way it is now. You know, because then at least that would work well with this, because then when your shields are down, then you can rely on salvation for the remainder of that stuff. And with Jacob's weaponry, you'll get a lot back. And considering you have good reload, well, yeah. Oh, last thing I want to say about Zane. So, charge relay and some of these other things that work with barrier, the problem is that they rely on the barrier to be on the ground. If it's picked up, then charge relay does absolutely nothing. As far as I can tell, nanites or that kind of thing doesn't seem to have an effect. Retaliation, though, definitely works, and deterrence field definitely works. So, yeah, you do kind of want those if you can help it. But yeah, those are the problems. I'm going to go ahead and recording, and I'll begin a new recording for talking about the skill trees.